She didn't even see it coming. Vivian Kane walked into the maternity wing like she owned the floor, heels clicking against hospital tile, chin lifted, eyes scanning the waiting area until they landed on Elena Cross, sitting alone in a plastic chair, with her hands folded over her swollen belly, 7 months pregnant, waiting for a routine check, alone as she had been for most of this pregnancy. Vivienne crossed the room in 12 steps. Then she shoved Elena hard, deliberate, without warning, sending her crashing sideways into the metal armrest of the chair. The impact drew a sharp cry from Elena, brought nurses running, set monitors beeping somewhere down the hall. Vivienne stood over her, voice low and precise, like she had rehearsed every word. He doesn't want you anymore. He never did. If you were sitting in that chair 7 months alone, shoved by the woman sleeping with your husband, what would you do? This is Elena's story, and it is only just beginning. Before we go further, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this one. Hit the like button if you're already feeling something, and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where everything started to fall apart. The appointment had been scheduled for 10 in the morning. Elena arrived at 9:45, the way she always did, early enough to fill out any paperwork, early enough to avoid the rush of people who crowded the elevator banks at the top of the hour. She wore a cream-colored blouse she'd bought 2 sizes up because nothing from before the pregnancy fit right anymore, and her dark hair was pulled back in the kind of knot that said she had tried, even if the trying felt automatic these days. The maternity wing of Mercy General was on the 4th floor. Elena knew the route by heart. She'd made this trip 11 times already across 2 trimesters, and 11 times she had made it alone. In the beginning, she had told herself Damien would come to the next one. Then she stopped telling herself that, and started telling the nurses he had an important board meeting, which was sometimes true, and sometimes just easier than the truth. The truth was that Damien Cross, founder and CEO of CrossTech, a man whose face appeared in Forbes 3 years running, had not attended a single prenatal appointment since the first one, where he had sat with his phone face down on his knee and stared at the ultrasound screen with the particular expression of someone while watching a presentation that had nothing to do with them. Elena sat down in the waiting area, a row of padded chairs along a wall, with a window that looked out over a courtyard she had never once seen anyone use, and pulled her phone from her bag. No messages. She set it face down on her thigh, the same way Damien used to set his, and recognized the habit immediately and turned it back over. She had been staring at a parenting magazine without reading it for about 8 minutes when the elevator opened. She heard the heels first. There was a particular rhythm to the way Vivienne Kane moved. Elena had only met her 3 times twice at industry events, where they had exchanged polite nothings under chandelier light, and once in the lobby of the CrossTech building, when Elena had stopped by unannounced and found Vivienne walking out of Damien's private elevator with a leather portfolio tucked under her arm and a smile calibrated to suggest that whatever Elena was thinking, she was wrong. Elena had been wrong, she had told herself. Vivienne was a publicist, a professional. Damien's crisis PR manager, the woman who had spent 4 years building his public image into something clean and aspirational. That was what she had told herself. The heels stopped in front of her. Elena looked up. Vivienne was dressed in deep burgundy, a wrap dress that probably cost more than Elena's monthly maternity budget. Her dark blonde hair pinned in a way that made her look both effortless and intentional. She was 34. She was beautiful the way certain weapons were beautiful, precise, and functional, and designed to do damage. She looked at Elena's stomach first, then at Elena's face. "You look tired," Vivienne said. Her tone was not unkind. That was the worst part of it. "You should really have someone with you for these things." Elena set the magazine down carefully. "Vivienne, this isn't the place." "I know, I chose it anyway." She sat down uninvited 2 seats over, crossing her ankles. "Because you won't take my calls, and Damien keeps losing his nerve. I'm not doing this here." "You don't have to do anything," Vivienne said. "I'm going to talk. You're going to listen. And then you're going to understand something you've been avoiding for the better part of a year." Elena's hand rested on the curve of her stomach. The baby had been still all morning, which usually meant he was sleeping, and she was grateful for that now, irrationally. She did not want him to feel whatever she was feeling. "Damien is not coming back to you," Vivienne said. She wasn't whispering. The woman at the reception desk had stopped typing. Not because of the pregnancy, not in spite of it. "The marriage is over, and it has been over for longer than you've allowed yourself to admit." I'm not asking you to forgive anyone. I'm asking you to stop making this harder than it needs to be. I need you to leave." Elena's voice stayed even. She had learned to keep it even. Damien had once told her that she always sounded like she was managing him, and she had worked very hard to stop sounding that way, even when she was scared, even when she was angry. Old habit. Bad one. Please, you keep saying no to his lawyer's calls. You keep delaying the paperwork. Do you think that changes anything? Do you think this baby is going to bring him home? Vivienne. Because I've been watching you do this for 8 months, and I genuinely cannot decide if you're deluded or just cruel. Elena stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not say anything. She simply stood, which was the only thing she could think to do that might communicate that this conversation was over in a language Vivienne might respect. What happened next took approximately 2 seconds. Vivienne stood too, and then she stepped forward and put both hands flat against Elena's shoulders and shook hard, with the kind of force that didn't come from nowhere, that came from somewhere specific and ugly and decided. Elena's heel caught the leg of the chair behind her. She went sideways, her hip catching the metal armrest, her shoulder twisting as she grabbed for the chair back and partially caught it and partially didn't. She did not fall all the way to the floor. That was probably the only thing that mattered, medically speaking, and she knew that immediately and clinically, even as her body registered the impact in cold waves of shock. The waiting room erupted. A nurse appeared from somewhere to Elena's left, another from the corridor, both of them calling out. The reception desk phone lifted. Alarms happening somewhere down the hall in the particular way that institutional alarms happen loud without being specific, urgent without telling you anything. Vivienne stepped back. Her composure had cracked, barely, just enough for something wild to show at the edges of her expression. Something that hadn't planned quite this far ahead. She moved into me, she started. "Ma'am, step back from her right now." The nurse was between them. Step back. Vivienne looked around at the room, at the nurses, at the woman at the reception desk who had a phone to her ear and wasn't blinking, at the small camera mounted in the upper corner of the waiting area, a red light steady beneath its lens. She looked at that camera for about 3 seconds. Then she walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and was gone before the doors opened on the next car arriving. What she left behind, though no one noticed it immediately, because everyone was focused on Elena, was a silver bracelet on the floor near the chair. Delicate chain, a rectangular pendant engraved with 2 letters. VK. She had worn it every time Elena had ever seen her. Elisa was on a gurney in an examination room when the nurses started asking her questions. She answered all of them. She was calm. She was the kind of calm that took active effort and had nothing peaceful about it. Her hip hurt. Her shoulder hurt. The baby, she felt him move. Finally, a rolling shift against her ribs was fine. She kept saying that. "He's fine, I can feel him moving, he's fine." The attending physician, a woman named Dr. Miriam Shah, who had been Elena's doctor since the 2nd trimester, came in and did what doctors do, checked vital signs, confirmed fetal heartbeat, pressed carefully along Elena's abdomen, asked if there was pain, asked where, asked her to rate it. 7, Elena said, then revised 5. "I don't know." "You don't have to know," Dr. Shah said, which was the kind of thing Elena usually appreciated and couldn't quite reach right now. She had called Damien from the gurney before Dr. Shah arrived. 3 rings and voicemail. She left a brief, factual message. She was at Mercy General. There had been an incident. She and the baby were okay. He should know. She kept her voice even. She did not say Vivienne's name. She did not know why she protected him this way even now. Reflexively, some wiring that hadn't gotten the signal yet. She tried her friend Carla next. Voicemail. Then her colleague Dana. Also voicemail. It was 11 in the morning on a Tuesday, and apparently everyone she knew was busy. She stared at the ceiling of the examination room for a moment. Then she scrolled to a number she had not called in over 2 years, and she pressed it. August Voss picked up on the 2nd ring. He always had. It was one of the few consistent things about him. If the phone rang, and he recognized the number, he picked up. He was 63 years old, founder of the Voss Capital Group, a man who had appeared on the cover of institutional finance publications more times than he cared to count. He had homes in Manhattan, in Connecticut, in Geneva. He ran a company with $11 billion under management. He was not by any reasonable standard an easy man to reach. But he picked up on the 2nd ring. "Elena," he said, and his voice had that particular quality it always with her. Not warm, exactly, but careful, like someone trying not to startle an animal that had learned to distrust sudden movements, which was, she understood now, A fair description of their relationship. Dad, she said. She had not used that word in 2 years either. I'm at mercy, General. The pause that followed lasted exactly 1 second. What happened? It wasn't a question, really. It was the way August Voss asked questions when he already suspected the answer was going to require action. She told him. Briefly, factually, the way she had learned to communicate with him, no excess, no emotional context he hadn't asked for, just the information. Vivienne had come to the hospital. There had been a physical altercation. She and the baby were being evaluated. Both appeared to be fine. Another pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, he said, not unkindly, just stating a fact. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up. Elena put the phone down on the gurney beside her and looked at the ceiling again. She had spent 2 years building a life that didn't require August Voss to show up and solve anything. 2 years making decisions without his approval, living in an apartment she'd chosen herself, married to a man her father had told her, with characteristic bluntness, seemed more interested in her connections than in her. She had told him he was wrong. She was realizing, with the particular bitterness of being right too late to do anything useful about it, that he had not been wrong. He arrived in 18 minutes. Elena heard him before she saw him, his voice in the corridor, talking to someone at the nurse's station, not raised, but with that specific weight to it that didn't require volume. August Voss was a compact man, 5'10", silver-haired, with the posture of someone who had spent 40 years in rooms where posture communicated something. He wore a charcoal suit because he always wore a charcoal suit. He looked at Elena on the gurney, at the monitor beside her, at the bruising already developing along her hip, at her face, and he did not say anything for a long moment. Then he pulled a chair to the side of the gurney and sat down. Tell me again, he said. From the beginning. She told him again. This time in a little more detail, because he was her father, and he was there and the effort of being concise had run out. He listened without interrupting, which was not always something he was capable of. And his face did the thing it did when he was processing information and deciding what to do with it, a kind of stillness that other people sometimes mistook for coldness. When she finished, he said, "You called Damien." He didn't answer. August nodded once, like that confirmed something. "The bracelet," he said. "Did anyone secure it?" "The nurses know it's there. I told them not to." She paused. "I don't know if they listened. I'll handle it." He stood. "Dr. Shaw, what did she say exactly about the baby?" "Fine. Fetal heart rate is normal. She wants to do an ultrasound to confirm everything, but she's not worried." "She's not worried," he repeated. Not with skepticism, just filing it. "I'm not worried either," Elena said, and her voice did something she hadn't let it do until now, a small fracture at the bottom of the words. "He's moving. He's been moving. I can feel him." August looked at her. He was not a man who touched people easily. That was one of the ways he had failed her when she was growing up, the arm's-length quality of his affection. But he put his hand over hers on the gurney, briefly, and then took it away. "Good," he said. "That's good." He went out to speak to the nurses. Damien called back 44 minutes after Elena had left her message. She was in the middle of an ultrasound, watching the screen, listening to the steady percussion of her son's heartbeat through the monitor, and her phone buzzed on the chair beside the bed. She saw his name and let it go to voicemail. "When the ultrasound was done, everything normal, doctor." Shaw pronounced, with the particular relief of someone who had been quietly worried. Elena listened to Damien's message. His voice was measured. He said he had just seen her call. He said he had been in a meeting that ran over, which was possible. He said he hoped everything was all right and that he would come by the hospital as soon as he could get away, which meant he would not come by the hospital. He did not mention Vivienne. He did not ask what had happened. He said the words, "I hope everything is all right," in the tone of someone who has calculated that those words will be sufficient. She deleted the message. August reappeared in the doorway. He had the silver bracelet, sealed in one of the small evidence bags that hospital security kept at their station, held between 2 fingers. "I spoke with the security office," he said. "They have footage from the waiting area camera. I asked them to preserve it and not share it with anyone until their legal department has reviewed the request protocol." He said this in the exact tone he might use to report that he had confirmed a dinner reservation. "I also asked the nurse at reception to give a written account of what she witnessed." Elena looked at the evidence bag, at the bracelet. "Dad," she said, "I don't want to make this into—" "I know what you don't want," he said. "You've never wanted to make anything into anything. Your whole life." He was not saying it cruelly. He was just saying it. "But someone's assaulted you in a hospital waiting room while you were 7 months pregnant. and there is video evidence, and it did not occur spontaneously. I am going to find out why it happened, and who authorized it, and what it was meant to accomplish. Vivienne doesn't need authorization. Vivienne Kane is a professional, August said. She does not make professional decisions on impulse. She came to this hospital specifically, to this waiting room specifically, at the time of your appointment. He sat back down. How did she know you had an appointment today? Elena opened her mouth, closed it. She thought about that for a long moment. Damien knew, she said slowly. Yes, August said. He did. Dr. Shaw discharged Elena 4 hours later, with instructions to rest for 48 hours, avoid exertion, take acetaminophen for the bruising, and come back immediately if she felt anything unusual. The bruise along her hip was an ugly thing, deep purple, already spreading toward yellow at the edges, but the injury was muscular, not skeletal, and the baby was fine. She said it again to August in the elevator. On the way down, the baby is fine. I heard you, he said. I need you to not do anything that's going to escalate. What I am going to do, August said without looking at her, is take you to the Greystone apartment, which has security on the door and cameras in the lobby, and I am going to have Marcus come and talk to both of us, and then I am going to do what I determine is appropriate. That is what I am going to do. The Greystone was the apartment building August owned on West 72nd Street, 8 floors, 12 units, top-tier security. Elena had lived there briefly after college. She associated it with the period of her life before she had started making her own decisions. I have my own apartment, she said. Your own apartment has a doorman who buzzes anyone up if they say they're a delivery, August said. I've mentioned this once or twice, 5 times. But now you'll move, she almost argued. She looked at his face, that careful, contained expression that she had spent most of her life resenting, and some of the last few hours being quietly grateful for, and she didn't. Temporarily, she said. Temporarily, he agreed, in the tone of someone who understood that temporarily was a door she needed to believe was still open. Marcus Hale arrived at the Greystone apartment at 7 in the evening, 40 minutes after Elena and August. He was 49 angular, with reading glasses he never seemed to actually put on, but carried in his breast pocket. He had worked for August for 18 years, first as an analyst, then as chief strategist, which was a title that covered a range of activities depending on what the situation required. Elena had known him since she was in her mid-20s. He brought takeout Thai food from a place on Amsterdam Avenue. 3 bags. Too much food for 2 people, which Elena interpreted as either optimism or anxiety. She ate about a third of what was on her plate. August ate nothing, which was his version of being worried. Marcus ate steadily and listened while August laid out what he knew. What August knew at that point was not much. The event at the hospital, the bracelet, the security footage, the timing of the appointment, and the question of who had known about it. What August suspected was considerably more. Damien's not stupid, Marcus said when August finished. He was refilling his water glass. He wouldn't put Vivienne up to something like this without thinking he could distance himself from it. He wouldn't put her up to it at all, August said, if he didn't think it was going to accomplish something specific. What does he need it to accomplish? Elena said. Both men looked at her. She had been quiet for most of the last 20 minutes, eating her 3rd spring roll and watching them work through the logic. The divorce, Marcus said carefully. The divorce is... She paused. We haven't filed, either of us. The lawyers have been going back and forth about terms, but nothing has been filed. Why, August said, not accusatory. Just asking. Elena looked at her plate. Because I wasn't ready. Because I was pregnant and trying to... She stopped. Started again. Because every time I got close to being ready, something shifted and I thought maybe... She put the spring roll down. It doesn't matter. It matters to the timing, Marcus said. He was gentle about it. He was almost always gentle. It was one of the things that made him useful in rooms where August was not. If he was looking to push the proceedings in a specific direction before you were prepared. He needs her to look unstable, August said. Marcus nodded. Or distracted. Or too overwhelmed to be paying attention to what the lawyers are doing with the asset inventory. Elena was quiet for a moment. What asset inventory? She said. Marcus and August exchanged a look. It was brief, barely a second, but she caught it. She said. Marcus is doing preliminary work, August said. At my request, before today. He paused. I should have told you. Yes, as Elena said. You should have. There are accounts connected to Crosstech, Marcus said, leaning forwards, slightly elbows on the table. Operating accounts, vendor accounts, a couple of subsidiary entities. The movement in those accounts over the last 18 months is interesting. not typical for a company his size. Some of it routes through entities that don't appear in Crosstech's public disclosures. Meaning what? Elena said. Meaning either someone has been moving money in ways they'd rather not have scrutinized, Marcus said, or Damien's CFO is very creative with his accounting, or both. Or both, August said. Elena looked out the window. The city was doing its nighttime thing lights and movement, and the particular ambient hum of Manhattan after the dark that she had lived with long enough that silence felt stranger. She thought about Damien in his office somewhere in Midtown, probably knowing by now that she was here, in this apartment, with her father. Probably calculating. He always calculated. She had admired it once. The precision of him, the way he approached every situation, like a problem with a solution waiting to be found. She had mistaken it for intelligence. It was intelligence, partially, but it was also the way certain people related to everything, including people, including wives, including unborn children as variables in a problem set. He knew about the appointment, she said again. Not as a question. Yes, August said. And he let her go. Nobody said anything. He let her go, Elena said, knowing she would confront me. Maybe not knowing how far she'd go, but knowing she'd go. She put her hands flat on the table. Okay, she said. It was just one word, and it was the quietest thing she'd said all day, and somehow it carried more weight than anything else, because it was the sound of something inside her that had been hoping for an explanation, a misunderstanding, some version of events that would make Damien salvageable, finally going quiet for good. August looked at his daughter for a long moment. I need you to trust me, he said. Not entirely, not blindly. I know we don't do it that way. But enough. Elena considered this. Don't hide things from me again, she said. Whatever you find. I want agreed, August said. Marcus was already opening his laptop. 3 days later, the anonymous posts started. They appeared first on 2 separate social media platforms in the span of 4 hours, posted by accounts with no history and generic identifiers. The content was specific in its vagueness, unnamed sources, unverified claims. The suggestion that a prominent tech CEO's wife had a history of emotional instability, that she had been hospitalized recently after what was described as a self-inflicted incident, that her family was pressuring her husband through legal channels in a manner that constituted harassment. None of it was true. All of it was designed to be almost plausible. Elena saw it when Carla texted her a screenshot with 3 question marks. She showed it to Marcus, who looked at it, then showed it to August, who read it twice and set his phone on the table with a particular careful precision. How many accounts? August said. 6 that we found, Marcus said. Probably more. The language is similar across all of them. Same phrasing in 2 specific places. Same source, August said. Same source or a very small team with very specific instructions, Marcus said. It's not organic. The timing is too clean and the language has a PR quality to it. It sounds like a brief. Elena had been rereading the screenshot. She set her phone down. It's Vivian, she said. Vivian or someone she directed, Marcus said. They're calling me unstable, Elena said. Her voice was flat. Not upset something past upset. Something that had moved through upset and come out the other side into a kind of cold clarity. While I'm 7 months pregnant. Yes, Marcus said. Because that's what you do, she said, almost to herself. When you need someone to seem like they can't be trusted. When you need to control a narrative before it gets ahead of you. She looked at August. They're worried about something. Not just the divorce. Something specific they need to get in front of. August nodded slowly. That's what Marcus thinks too. The financial accounts, she said. The financial accounts, Marcus confirmed. Elena stood up. She walked to the window and looked out. 7 months pregnant. Bruise fading on her hip. Standing in her father's apartment instead of her own. Reading anonymous posts online calling her unstable. They think they can make me disappear into the background, she said. The hysterical pregnant wife who couldn't keep her husband. Too emotional, too messy, not worth listening to. She turned back to the room. Start pulling everything, she said to Marcus. Every account, every entity, every subsidiary. I want to understand exactly what Damien has been doing with his money, and I want to understand it before his lawyers do. Marcus looked at August. August looked at Elena. Something crossed his face that she hadn't seen in a very long time. It wasn't pride exactly. It was closer to recognition, the specific look of someone who has found, in the worst possible circumstances, that the person they were worried about is, in fact, going to be all right. Everything, he said to Marcus. Marcus opened his laptop again. The baby shifted inside her, slow and rolling, and Elena put one hand against her side and held it there for a moment, steady, and then she sat back down at the table and got to work. Marcus worked through the night. Elena knew this because she woke at 3 in the morning for the 4th time, the baby pressing against her bladder, her hip still tender enough to make rolling over an event rather than a movement. And she could see the light under the door of the small office August used when he stayed here. And she could hear the low sound of Marcus on a call, his voice a controlled murmur through the wall, the kind of voice that didn't want to be heard, but had too much to say to be entirely silent. She stood in the hallway in her socks and listened for a moment without intending to. Not a standard routing pattern, Marcus was saying. The Cayman entity isn't new. It predates the Series B by at least 14 months, which means a pause. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Elena went back to bed. She lay on her left side the way Dr. Shaw had told her to, one pillow between her knees, and she looked at the wall and thought about Damien in the early days, before Crosstech had its first major round of funding, when they lived in a 2-bedroom in Murray Hill, and he worked at the kitchen table until midnight, and she would bring him coffee and sit across from him and ask questions about the company because she was genuinely curious, and also because she liked watching him talk about things he cared about. He had been good at caring about things then, or he had been good at performing it. She had never been able to determine, now looking back, which one was true. She fell asleep before she could decide. At breakfast, August told her that Marcus had found 3 entities. He said it the way he said most things across the table, with his coffee cup in one hand and his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, as if the information were a memo he was summarizing, rather than something that might determine the next several years of her life. 3 entities. Shell companies, technically, though Marcus preferred the term special purpose vehicles because it was accurate and because Damien's lawyers would eventually use the more clinical language, and it was useful to be fluent in it in advance. 2 registered in the Cayman Islands. 1 in Delaware, which was interesting because Delaware entities were often more transparent than offshore vehicles, which suggested either sloppiness or a specific structural intention that wasn't yet clear. All 3 have financial connections to Crosstech, August said, not through the main operating accounts, through subsidiary vendors, companies that appear in Crosstech's accounting as service providers. What kind of services? Elena said. Marketing consultation, August said. Technology licensing, event management. Elena put her fork down. Vivian runs a PR and events company. She does, August said. She looked at him. You already knew that. I wanted to see if you would connect it yourself. Dad. It's not a test, he said. I'm old and I think in particular patterns. One of them is that other people should arrive at conclusions themselves when they can, because it changes how they hold the information. He picked up his coffee. You hold it differently when you built it. This was, Elena thought, the most her father had explained his reasoning in her living memory. How much? She said, in total. Marcus is still working through it. Current estimate is somewhere between 4 and 7 million over 26 months. But that number will move. Move which direction? August looked at her steadily. Up, she absorbed that. The baby moved, a slow rotation, and she pressed one hand against her side without thinking. He was using the company, she said, to pay her, while telling me she was a professional contact. That is what the money suggests, yes. And if that's true, she stopped. Started again. If the payments aren't just personal, if they're structural. If Vivienne has been embedded in Crosstech's accounts as a vendor for 2 years, then the financial entanglement between Damien and Vivienne is not just personal, August said. It's institutional, which means the divorce proceedings can't simply be about the marriage. Elena was quiet for a moment. It's also fraud, she said. Potentially. Yes. She picked up her fork again and looked at her eggs and didn't eat them. He's not just cheating on me, she said. He's been building something with her, with my family's name still attached to his. August said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. Damien called at 11:15. Elena was in the living room with her laptop, reviewing documents Marcus had printed and left in a labeled folder. And when her phone lit up with Damien's name, she looked at it for 2 full rings before she answered. Elena. His voice was careful, the specific careful of someone who has decided what register to use in advance. I heard you're at your father's. Are you all right? I'm fine, she said. The baby's fine. Good. That's a pause. I'm glad. I should have come by the hospital. I know that. You should have come to the appointment, she said. Elena, what do you want, Damien? The pause that followed was slightly too long. She recognized this. It was him recalibrating, deciding which version of this conversation he was in, and adjusting accordingly. I want to talk, he said. About what happened, about Vivienne. Go ahead. Not on the phone. I think we should. On the phone is fine, Elena said. Or you can talk to my lawyer. Those are the options. You don't have a lawyer. I will by Thursday. Another pause. This one different something shifted in it. The quality of the silence changed from calculated to genuinely caught off guard, and she noted this and filed it away. She acted on her own, Damien said. His voice had changed too, less managed. Something underneath the managed surface, briefly visible. I didn't know she was going to go there. I didn't authorize. She knew about my appointment, Elena said. I may have mentioned. Damien. She kept her voice completely flat. She knew what time it was. She came specifically to that waiting room at that specific time. Someone told her. And you are the only person with access to my medical schedule. Silence. I didn't tell her to do anything, he said finally. That's the truth. I believe you didn't tell her to shove me, Elena said. I believe that exceeded whatever instruction you gave her, which makes it worse, actually. Not better. Elena, don't call me again without going through the lawyer, she said, and hung up. She put the phone down on the couch beside her and realized her hands were steady, and that the steadiness was not calm, not really, but something adjacent to it that she was choosing to treat as the same thing. Marcus came in at noon with more printed documents, and a look on his face that she had learned, over the years, to treat as the equivalent of a warning light. The social media posts, he said, sitting down across from her. 6 more overnight. One of them is starting to get traction. He turned his laptop so she could see the screen. The post had been shared 400 times. It was a thread, 5 posts stitched together, with what appeared to be a screenshot of a medical document. She couldn't tell if it was authentic or manufactured, that referenced her name and the word evaluation in a context that implied psychiatric observation. She read it twice. This didn't come from the hospital, Marcus said. The document is either fake or it's been altered. We're having it analyzed. How would they get a real document to alter? They might not need a real one, Marcus said. The appearance of authenticity is the point. By the time anyone confirms it's false, the narrative has already moved. Elena looked at the share count. It had gone up while she was reading. What does Vivian's company do exactly? She said. Her official services. Media strategy. Crisis communications. Brand management, Marcus said. She has a client list that's mostly in finance and technology. Some entertainment. Crosstech has been on the client roster for 3 years. 3 years, Elena repeated. They had been married 4. She was working with him before I knew who she was. Yes, she thought about that. The early dinner parties where Vivienne had appeared sometimes as a professional contact. The events where they had been photographed in the same frame. Nothing to read into. The way Elena had occasionally felt in those rooms, that she was missing a conversation that was happening at a frequency she couldn't quite hear. She hadn't been paranoid. She had been exactly right. She had just decided to stop listening. I want to talk to the hospital security office myself, she said. Marcus raised his eyebrows slightly. Your father was planning to... I know what my father was planning, Elena said. I want to talk to them myself. August drove her. He didn't argue about it, which was its own small surprise. He pulled up outside Mercy General at 2 in the afternoon and parked in the short-term lot and walked with her to the security office on the basement level. A room that smelled like old coffee and recycled air, where a man named Gerald, who was approximately 60, and had the bearing of someone who had worked hospital security for too long to be surprised by anything, sat behind a desk and looked at them with polite, careful neutrality. Elena explained who she was. She explained what she wanted. She asked, calmly and specifically, whether the footage from the waiting area camera on the 4th floor from Tuesday morning had been preserved, whether a chain of custody had been established, and whether any copies had been made or transmitted to any parties outside the security office. Gerald looked at August. She's asking, August said. Gerald looked back at Elena. The footage has been preserved, he said. Chain of custody documentation was completed Tuesday afternoon. No copies have been transmitted. Your father's attorney contacted us Tuesday, and we've been holding it pending formal legal request. I'd like to see it, Elena said. Mrs. Cross, I'm not asking you to give it to me, she said. I'm asking to view it here in this room with you present. I was the person in the footage. I think I have a reasonable basis for that request. Gerald looked at her for a moment. Then he turned to his computer and typed something and turned the monitor around. The footage was grainy in the way hospital cameras were always grainy, high angle, wide lens washed out by the fluorescent light. She watched herself walk in, sit down, pick up the magazine, put it down. She watched the elevator open. She watched Vivienne cross the room. She watched what happened next. It was strange watching it. She had been present for all of it and had replayed it in her head many times. But seeing it from above and outside gave it a quality that her memory hadn't. It showed her how deliberate it was, how the shove wasn't reactive, how Vivienne had stood over her for a moment before it happened, had squared her feet, had braced, had decided. It also showed something else. "Can you go back?" Elena said. 20 seconds before, "Freeze it there." Gerald rewound, froze Vivienne, entering the elevator bank on her way in, holding her phone, looking at the screen, typing something. "Is there a timestamp on that?" Elena said. 11:03, Gerald said. "My appointment was at 10, Elena said. "I was 45 minutes in when this happened." "Approximately." "So she arrived at 11:03, Marcus said from behind her. He had been quiet for the last 10 minutes, and she typed a message when she came in. She was reporting to someone, Elena said, before she went upstairs. The room was quiet. "I'd like this footage preserved with full chain of custody," Elena said to Gerald, "and I'll have my attorney file the formal request for a certified copy by end of business tomorrow." "Understood," Gerald said. Damien's lawyer called Elena's cell phone at 4:17 p.m., while she was in the car on the way back to the Greystone. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway, because she had been expecting a call from some number she didn't recognize. The lawyer's name was Preston Marks. She knew him by reputation, mid-50s, midtown firm, the kind of attorney who specialized in high-asset divorces and had a success rate he was not shy about mentioning. "Ms. Voss," he said. He used her maiden name, which was deliberate. "I'm calling on behalf of my client to initiate a formal conversation about the dissolution proceedings and to propose a timeline that might be—" "Mr. Marks," Elena said, "has your client disclosed to you the nature of his financial relationships with Vivienne Kane's company over the past 3 years?" Pause. "I'm not in a position to discuss—" "Has he disclosed the 3 special-purpose vehicles connected to Crosstech's vendor accounts?" she said. "The ones routed through Cayman and Delaware." A longer pause. "Ms. Voss, I think it would be productive for all parties if we—" "I'll have my attorney reach out by end of week," she said. "Please make sure your client is available for a full financial disclosure conversation. Everything." Not a summary. She hung up. August was looking at the road. His profile gave nothing away, but she could see in the set of his jaw something that was almost satisfaction. "You're going to enjoy this," she said. "I'm going to be very professional about it," he said. "That's not what I asked." He said nothing for a moment. "Your mother," he said, finally, "used to say I was at my worst when I was enjoying myself most." Elena looked at him. This was more personal information than August Voss had voluntarily offered in the past decade. "She was right," she said. Often he said yes. The attorney Elena hired was named Judith Crane, and she was the kind of woman who had spent 30 years in family law by refusing to treat any of it as personal, which Elena found intensely reassuring. She was 61, silver-haired, kept her office at a temperature that suggested she ran perpetually warm, and listened to everything Elena told her without writing anything down, which Elena initially found alarming until she realized that Crane was one of those people who didn't need to write things down, because everything went somewhere it would stay. When Elena finished, Crane folded her hands on her desk. "The financial irregularities," she said. "How solid is the documentation?" "Marcus is still building it," Elena said. "But he's been doing this for 18 years for my father's company. If he says there's something there—" "There's something there," Crane said, not dismissively. "Just efficiently, yes. The assault charges. Are you pursuing? I want to." "The DA's office, I know someone," Crane said. "Leave that thread with me," she paused. "Your husband's attorney is Preston Marks." "Yes." Crane's expression did something very small. "Preston is thorough, and he's not unethical, but he won't have advised your husband to do any of this. If he was brought in after the financial arrangements were already in place, he's going to be managing consequences he didn't create, which is not a position Preston enjoys." She was quiet for a moment. "Has your husband made any direct contact since the hospital incident?" "He called once. I told him to go through you." "Good." She made a single note. "I want a full inventory of marital assets. Everything you know about accounts, properties, equity stakes, vesting schedules, whatever you have access to. I'll have Marcus send what he's compiled. I also want to know—" Crane looked at her carefully. "How are you? Not medically. I know the baby is fine. How are you?" Elena considered the question. "I'm angry," she said, "which is useful. And I'm tired, which is less useful. But there's not much I can do about that right now." Crane nodded once, as if that were exactly the right answer. "Good," she said. Angry I can work with, tired I can work around. Let's begin. The message arrived on a Thursday evening. Elena was in the kitchen of the Greystone apartment, eating soup she hadn't particularly wanted, but was eating because Dr. Shaw had explained, patiently and specifically, that the baby needed her to eat and that her needs and his needs were currently the same needs. She had her phone beside her, face up this time, out of a habit she was trying to break and kept failing to break. The message came from a number she didn't know. No contact attached to it. Just text. It said, "You are not safe anywhere. Stop pulling on things that don't belong to you." She read it twice. Then she put her spoon down and picked up her phone and called Marcus. He answered on the first ring. "I just got a message," she said, "from an unknown number. Read it to me." She read it. 3 seconds of silence. "Forward it to me right now. Don't delete it. Screenshot it first and then forward the original message." She did both. "Marcus," she said, "what does that mean? Stop pulling on things that don't belong to you." "It means someone knows we're looking at the accounts," he said. His voice had changed tighter, lower, the way it went when something had moved from theoretical to immediate. "And it means they're scared enough to send a message directly, or stupid enough." "Sometimes scared looks like stupid," he said. "The question is which one this is. Does it change what we do?" A pause. "It means we move faster," he said. "And it means you don't go anywhere without someone who knows where you are. Understood?" "Understood," she said. She looked at the soup. She picked up the spoon and ate 3 more mouthfuls, mechanically, because the baby needed her to, and because she refused to be the kind of person who stopped eating when things got difficult. The baby shifted against her ribs, slow and steady. "I hear you," she said quietly to him, to herself. The next morning, Marcus laid out what the overnight work had uncovered, and the room went very still in the way. Rooms went still when the information in them outgrew the space. The 3 entities were not 3 entities. They were the visible layer of something larger, 4 additional vehicles, 2 of them active within the last 60 days, one of them newly registered, established 9 days after the hospital incident. Moving money with a pattern that Marcus described, with the precision of someone who chose words carefully, as consistent with the destruction of an evidentiary trail. "He's covering it," August said. "Someone is," Marcus said. "Whether Damien is directing it or Vivienne or both." "It's both," Elena said. Both men looked at her. "She didn't just come to the hospital because she was angry," Elena said. "She'd been sitting with this for 2 days, turning it over, and she was sure of it now, in the specific way that things became sure when they clicked into place with everything else you already knew. She came to destabilize me, to make me look erratic, and the post started the same week, and now the accounts are being restructured." She looked at Marcus. "It's a coordinated campaign," she said. "It always was. The affair, the smear, the legal pressure, the threats. It's one plan." To do what, August said, though she could tell from his face that he already knew. "To move money before the divorce proceedings force a full disclosure," she said. "And to make sure that if I try to talk about it, I've already been established as someone no one should listen to." The room was quiet. "They started it before she shoved me," Elena said. "The social media accounts were active 2 weeks before the hospital. Check the timestamps." She looked at her father. "Damien has been planning to leave this marriage for at least 3 months. And for 3 months, Vivienne has been building the narrative that would follow me out the door. And for longer than that," she paused. "He has been moving money to places I can't reach." August set his coffee cup down with a small, precise sound. "Marcus," he said. "I know," Marcus said. "How long do we have before the new entity is fully operational and the trail goes cold?" Marcus looked at his laptop. "If they're moving at the pace the last 72 hours suggest." He paused. 2 weeks, maybe less. August looked at Elena. Elena looked back at him. "Then we stop waiting," she said. She said it quietly, without drama, the way you said things when you had finished thinking about them, and there was nothing left to decide. And in that moment she felt something she hadn't expected, not relief exactly, not readiness exactly, but the specific sensation of a door closing behind her, and understanding with complete clarity that she was never going back through it. Marcus found the first real crack on a Friday morning, 9 days after Elena had said, "Then we stop waiting." And the crack was not in the financial structure the way they had expected. It was in a name. He came into the kitchen at 7:40, earlier than usual, still in the same shirt he'd been wearing the night before, carrying his laptop with the particular deliberateness of someone who had decided how to deliver information and was going to deliver it exactly that way, regardless of how the room received it. Elena was at the table with her tea. August had not yet appeared. She looked at Marcus's face and set the mug down. "What?" she said. He sat across from her and turned the laptop around. On the screen was a document, a corporate filing from Delaware, 18 months old. Names of registered agents and officers listed in the clean bureaucratic font of official paperwork. She read it once quickly and then again slowly, because the second name on the list needed to be read slowly to be believed. Thomas Voss, her brother. She looked up at Marcus. "It's him," Marcus said. Not a question. Confirming something he had already confirmed 4 times before walking in here, because Marcus did not bring information into a room until he was certain of it. "Thomas is listed as an officer," she said. "Registered agent on 2 of the 7 vehicles," Marcus said. "Not just this one. This is the earliest. His name appears again in a Cayman registration from 14 months ago under a numbered company that cross-references to the Delaware entity." Elena looked at the screen again. Thomas Voss. Her brother, who was 41 and worked as a venture capital associate at a firm in Midtown, and came to family dinners twice a year and called her on her birthday and had been. She realized now, with the cold precision of pure shock, inexplicably supportive of Damien for as long as she could remember, inexplicably willing to defend him, in small ways. In the soft language of reasonable men, Damien's under a lot of pressure. "Elena, you know how it is. Maybe you're being a little, maybe you should, maybe he didn't mean." She felt something move in her chest that was not quite nausea, and not quite grief, but lived between them. "How long has August known?" she said. Marcus's jaw tightened barely. "He doesn't." She looked at him. "You came to me first. You asked me not to hide things," he said. She absorbed that. Thomas, her brother, on the paperwork. His name clean and official in a document that connected directly to Damien's financial architecture, to the money being moved, to the shell that was now in the process of being dismantled before the divorce proceedings could reach it. "How much does he benefit?" she said. Her voice was even. She was making it even. "That's still being worked out," Marcus said. "The structure suggests he's not a passive name on a document. There are equity allocations attached to the numbered Cayman entity. The beneficial ownership layers are complex, but..." He paused. "He has been compensated, Elena. Substantively." She pushed back from the table and stood up, not because she needed to go anywhere, but because sitting still had suddenly become impossible. She walked to the window and stood there, with her arms crossed over her chest, over the weight of the baby, and looked at the street below, where a delivery truck was idling, and a man in a gray jacket was walking a dog, and the world was continuing its ordinary business, completely indifferent to the fact that her brother had been on Damien's payroll. "For what?" she said. "What does Thomas give him?" "Access," Marcus said. "Your father's name carries a specific kind of credibility in institutional finance circles. Thomas doesn't have August's reach, but he has proximity to it. For investors who wanted the Voss family association without the scrutiny August would bring." "He rented out the name," Elena said. "Flat cold. In functional terms, yes." She turned around. "Did Damien approach him, or did Thomas go to Damien?" "I don't know yet. Does it matter?" Marcus looked at her for a moment. "To the legal picture? Maybe not significantly." He paused. "Probably." She stood in the kitchen with that for a long moment. She was 8 months pregnant. She was standing in her father's apartment because her husband's mistress had shoved her in a hospital waiting room. She had just been told that her brother had been financially entangled with her husband in secret for over a year. "Wake August up," she said. She left the room before August came out. She went to the bathroom and ran cold water over her wrists, which was something she had started doing years ago, when she needed to interrupt a feeling before it became an action, and she stood there for approximately 90 seconds, and then dried her hands and looked at herself in the mirror, and said aloud, to herself, "You knew something was wrong. You always knew," which was not comforting. But it was true, and she preferred truth to comfort as a rule, and especially now. She went back to the kitchen. August was at the table in his robe, the laptop in front of him, reading. She watched his face as he read. She had spent a significant portion of her childhood studying her father's face for information, since he rarely provided it verbally, and she had become proficient at reading it. What moved across it now as he read the name, as he read it again, as he scrolled down and read the Cayman filing, was not anger. Not yet. It was something prior to anger, a particular kind of stillness that she associated with the moments before he made decisions that other people would not know had already been made. He closed the laptop. He sat with his hands flat on the table. "How long has Marcus had this?" he said. "He found it overnight," Elena said. "He came to me first." August looked at her. He stopped. I asked him not to hide things from me, Elena said. August picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking. Your brother, he said. Yes. He was at dinner, August said. 3 weeks ago. He sat at that table and asked how you were doing and told me Damien would come around. He paused. He said Damien would come around. Elena said nothing. Because he needed to keep me calm, August said slowly. Keep me at a distance. Give Damien time to move the money before anyone with resources was looking at it. That's what it looks like, Elena said. August stood up. He was still in his robe, and he was 63 years old, and in this moment he looked both older and more dangerous than she had ever seen him. He went to the window, the same window she had stood at 20 minutes ago, and he looked out at the same delivery truck, now moving, and the same street, and he stood there in silence for a very long time. Where's Thomas now? He said. His office, presumably, Marcus said. It's a workday. I want to know his location by this afternoon, August said. Don't contact him. Don't signal anything. I want to know where he is, and I want to speak with him in person before he has any indication we have found this. August, Elena said. He turned. I want to be there, she said. His first instinct was visible in his face. Before he suppressed it, the protective reflex. The "you're 8 months pregnant," the "let me handle this." She watched him suppress it. You will be there, he said. They found Thomas at his office at 2 in the afternoon. Marcus had confirmed his location through 3 separate channels by noon. The office was on the 38th floor of a building on Park Avenue, Venture Capital Aesthetics, all glass and clean lines, and the particular curated emptiness of spaces designed to communicate that the people inside them didn't need to impress anyone. Thomas was in a glass-walled conference room when they arrived, alone with a laptop and a cold cup of coffee. He looked up when the assistant opened the door, and when he saw Elena, his face did something very quick and very small that she recognized immediately as the look of someone whose contingency plan has just arrived earlier than expected. Then he arranged his face into concern. He was good at it. Elena. He started to stand doing here. You look... Sit down, August said from behind her. Thomas looked at his father. Something in August's tone, the flatness of it, the complete absence of the careful warmth August sometimes deployed with his son, stopped him in the middle of standing. He sat back down. Elena pulled out a chair across from him and sat, which took a moment because 8 months pregnant and conference room chairs were not designed with each other in mind, and the minor physical awkwardness of it was strangely grounding. She put a folder on the table. Inside, printed copies of the Delaware filing, the Cayman registration, Marcus's summary of the equity allocations. Thomas looked at the folder. He didn't open it. I don't know what he started. Thomas, Elena said. I'm going to ask you one time, and I need you to answer me directly. And I need you to understand that we already have the documents. So, what I'm asking for is not information. I'm asking for a conversation. She held his gaze. How long? The silence in the room had a texture to it. Thomas looked at the folder. He looked at August, standing by the door with his arms at his sides. He looked at Elena. He looked, finally, like what he was. A man who had calculated wrong. It wasn't against you, he said. His voice had changed. The managed concern was gone. What replaced it was something flatter and more tired. Elena, it was never aimed at you. Tell me how long, she said. 2 years, he said, almost. August's breathing behind her did not change. She would have heard it if it had. Damien came to you, she said. He came to me with a specific opportunity, Thomas said. The entities needed a domestic anchor. Someone with a name that wasn't his, but that would carry weight with a certain class of investor. He wasn't asking me to do anything. He stopped. Started again. He said it was a tax structure, an optimization vehicle. He said it was completely legal. Is it legal? Elena said. Thomas looked at his hands. The structure isn't straightforwardly illegal, he said. But the use of it, he paused. Depending on what he's been moving through it. 4 to 7 million, Elena said. That's the current estimate. Probably higher. Thomas went very still. You didn't know the amount, she said. I knew there were vendor payments, he said. I didn't know that. He stopped. Damien said it was operational funds, management fees. Management fees to Vivian's company, Elena said. Thomas looked up at her. For a moment his face showed something she hadn't expected, genuine surprise. Not about Vivienne. He knew about Vivienne. Clearly, he had known for some time, but about the specific routing. About what Damien had been running through the entity Thomas had his name on. He used your entity to pay her, Elena said. She said it slowly, watching his face. He put Vivian on the payroll through a structure that has your name on the registration, which means if anyone starts tracing those payments. I'm on the document, Thomas said, very quietly. You're on the document, she said. The room was entirely silent. Thomas put his face in his hands. It was not a performance. She could tell the difference, and this wasn't one. This was a man realizing in real time that the calculation he had made 2 years ago, that Damien Cross was smart enough and careful enough and sufficiently motivated by self-interest to keep a secret, was wrong. That Damien had, whether intentionally or carelessly or both, built a structure that used Thomas Voss as a buffer between the money and himself. He set you up, August said. First words he had spoken since they sat down. Thomas looked up at his father. Not deliberately, maybe, August said. But the structure serves him and it exposes you. If the payments are scrutinized, and they will be scrutinized, Thomas, because I am going to make certain of it, your name is the one on the registration. I can explain my role, Thomas said. It was nominal. I didn't direct nominal participation in a structure used to move undisclosed funds through a divorce proceeding is not a comfortable position to explain, August said. Even with good counsel, Thomas was looking at Elena now. Not at August. At Elena. I didn't know he was going to do any of this to you, he said. And then, with a precision she hadn't expected, I didn't know about the hospital. When I heard, he stopped. You heard and you still didn't call me, she said. He had no answer for that. You heard that Vivienne had come to my prenatal appointment and shoved me, Elena said. And you didn't call me. Because calling me meant potentially having this conversation. Thomas looked like he had swallowed something sharp. You have a choice, August said. You can protect Damien, which will not protect you, because your name is on those documents regardless of what you choose. Or you can tell us everything, all of it, from the beginning, and we will have an accurate picture of who directed what, which means the distinction between your role and his role can actually be established. You're asking me to cooperate, Thomas said. I'm telling you that cooperation is the only version of this that ends with you in a defensible position, August said. Thomas looked at Elena again. She looked back at him, and she tried to find something in her chest that was softer than what was there, and she couldn't. She was 8 months pregnant, and her brother had been helping her husband dismantle the financial foundations of their marriage for 2 years. Start talking, she said. He talked for 2 hours. Marcus recorded it with Thomas's explicit consent, which Thomas gave after August's attorney joined by phone, and Thomas's own attorney, hastily called, slightly breathless, confirmed that voluntary cooperation at this stage was in his interest. What Thomas told them was worse than the documents had suggested, and the documents had already been bad. Damien had approached him 26 months ago, not with a proposal but with information. He had known something about Thomas, a failed investment, a private one, the kind that didn't appear in any official filing, that had cost Thomas $400,000 of his own money and would have been professionally embarrassing at minimum and career-ending at worst if it had become known. Damien had known. Thomas had never understood how. And Damien had come to him, not with a threat, never anything as direct as a threat, but with an opportunity that required Thomas's cooperation and solved Thomas's problem simultaneously. He had leverage, Elena said, when Thomas paused. He had information, Thomas said. He never called it leverage. Because he didn't need to, Elena said. Thomas was quiet. The entities, the payments, the equity allocations, which were not the generous gift they had appeared to be in the filings, but were structured to vest only if the entities remained intact and undisclosed through a specific date, which happened to be 90 days past the anticipated conclusion of the divorce proceedings, meaning Thomas would only receive his share if the financial structure survived the divorce intact. If it was discovered, if it was dismantled, if it was disclosed, the allocation evaporated. Damien had built Thomas's incentive into the architecture of the cover-up. He made sure you needed it to survive, Marcus said. Not accusingly, just precisely. Thomas looked at his hands. Yes, and Vivienne, Elena said. Did you know her role? I knew she was a vendor, Thomas said. I knew she and Damien were personally involved. I told myself the two things were separate. Were they? No, he said. I know that now. I think I knew it then. Elena stood up. It took a moment, the chair, the belly, the particular physical complexity of being 8 months pregnant, in a room where she desperately needed to stand, and nobody moved to help her, and she was grateful for that. Did Damien tell you about the social media campaign? She said. Thomas looked up the posts, the post calling me unstable, the fake medical document. His face changed. I didn't know about any of that. Thomas, I swear to you, he said, and there was something in his voice that she believed against her better judgment, a specific register of horror that was hard to manufacture cleanly. I knew about the entities. I knew about the vendor payments. I did not know they were going to run a campaign against you, personally. She looked at him for a long moment. The threatening message, she said. Someone sent me a message telling me I wasn't safe. Was that Damien? Thomas's face went through something complicated. I don't know who sent it, he said. But Damien told me 2 weeks ago that you were pulling on things that would unravel badly. He said it in that way he has, where he doesn't actually say what he means, but he means something specific. He paused. I think the message came from Vivienne. She had your number. I don't know if Damien asked her to send it or if she did it herself. Elena nodded. She picked up the folder from the table. My attorney will contact you, she said. You need to be honest with her about everything, Thomas. Not the version that makes you look most defensible. Everything. Because we are going to go into those proceedings with a complete picture, and if the picture you give us is incomplete, it will show, and at that point I cannot help you. Thomas looked at her. Are you trying to help me? She thought about that, genuinely for a moment. I'm trying not to, she said, but you're my brother, so. She walked to the door. August fell into step beside her. In the elevator on the way down, August said nothing for the first 15 floors. Then he was always jealous of you. I know, Elena said. Not of what you had. He stopped. I was not even-handed. When you were young. No, she said. You weren't. I am aware of that, he said. The elevator reached the lobby. I'm not interested in your guilt right now, Elena said, not cruelly. I need your resources and your attention and Marcus's brain. We can do the accounting of everything else later. August held the lobby door open. Yes, he said, we can. Judith Crane received the full deposition summary that evening, reviewed it overnight, and called Elena at 7 the following morning. This changes the proceedings significantly, she said without preamble, because she was a woman who did not use preamble. The financial structure is no longer simply a question of marital asset disclosure. We're looking at potential fraud in the inducement of investment from third parties, use of undisclosed shell entities in a domestic proceeding, and depending on what the Cayman documents show on beneficial ownership. Federal issues, Elena said. Potentially, Crane said. I want to bring in a colleague, someone who handles white-collar matters. Not because we're filing anything yet, but because the picture needs to be properly understood before we decide what to do with it. Do it, Elena said. There's something else, Crane said. Her voice changed register, just slightly in the way that signaled a turn. I made a call to the DA's office about the assault charge. They've been reviewing the footage. And they're moving forward with charges against Vivienne Kane, Crane said. Assault in the second degree, given the pregnancy. They should be serving her in the next 72 hours. Elena sat with that. She'll know we went to the DA, she said. Yes. That means Damien will know. Also yes. Which means the timeline for whatever they're doing with the entities just got shorter, Elena said. Yes, Crane said. Which is why I'm calling at 7 in the morning. A pause. How fast can Marcus move? As fast as he needs to, Elena said. Then he needs to move today, Crane said. I want a full certified copy of every document in that structure in my office by close of business. Whatever we can get authenticated and into official upper record before Damien's lawyers start filing protective motions. I'll call Marcus now, Elena. Crane paused, a beat of something that, for Judith Crane, was the closest thing she offered to warmth. You're doing well. I'm doing what needs doing, Elena said. That's the same thing, Crane said, and hung up. Marcus called back at 9:45. There's a problem, he said, and his voice had the particular quality that made her sit down immediately, instinctively, before she even heard what it was. Tell me, she said. The Cayman entity, he said. The second registration. The one with Thomas's name and the equity allocation. Yes, it was dissolved, he said. 36 hours ago. Before we had Thomas's deposition. Before the DA notified Vivienne, he paused. Someone knew we were moving. Elena looked at the wall in front of her. At a small painting August had hung there 15 years ago, a harbor scene, blue and gray, nothing dramatic about it. Someone told them, she said, yes. Who knew what we were doing, she said. Yumi August, Judith Crane, Thomas. The silence that followed lasted 3 full seconds. Marcus, she said. I know, he said. Thomas was in that room 2 hours before the entity was dissolved, she said. I know, he told us everything, she said, hearing her own voice go flat and quiet in the way it went, when she was trying to think clearly through something that was trying to make her not think clearly. He sat in that room and cooperated and told us everything. And then he went back to his office and made a phone call. Or he sent a message from the conference room, Marcus said. We don't know the exact timeline yet. Either way, Elena said. Either way, Marcus confirmed. She closed her eyes. Her brother. sitting across from her, looking appropriately devastated, delivering his cooperation and his contrition, and his "I didn't know about the campaign, Elena," I swear, while his phone was in his pocket, or on the table or somewhere, delivering a message she hadn't seen him send. "Can the dissolution be reversed?" she said, not easily, not quickly. The Cayman filing, "Get me Crane," she said. "Right now. Three-way call. Hold on." She held the harbor painting in front of her. Gray water, blue distance, the particular stillness of a scene that was finished, fully rendered, going nowhere. Crane's voice came on the line, sharp and immediate, I heard. "How much did we lose?" "The Cayman entity is gone," Marcus said. "The beneficial ownership records, the equity allocation documentation, the cross-referencing to the Delaware vehicle." "What do we still have?" Crane said. "The Delaware filing with Thomas's name, the early vendor payment records, the bank transfers that were routed through Crosstech's operating accounts, before the shell structure was fully built. In Thomas's deposition," Marcus paused, "which Thomas may now retract." Silence on the line. "Can he retract a recorded voluntary deposition?" Elena said. "He can claim coercion," Crane said. "He can claim he was under duress with family pressure. A good attorney will argue it." Another pause. "And Damien will get him a good attorney." Asana sat in the quiet of that for a moment. She had walked into that conference room to confront her brother, and she had gotten what looked like the truth, and it had cost them the one entity that would have made the financial case irrefutable, and now they were standing in a narrower space than they had been in 48 hours ago, with less evidence, since a witness who had just demonstrated, with perfect clarity, that his cooperation had a ceiling, and that ceiling was exactly as high as his own self-interest reached. She was 8 months pregnant, her back hurt, her hip still ached in the deep tissue way that wouldn't fully resolve until after the baby came. She had not slept more than 5 hours in any single night since the hospital. She was tired. She was also, she realized, done being the person who waited for things to resolve themselves into something she could accept. "Judith," she said, "yes. What do we need to do to take this into a federal jurisdiction?" she said. A very brief pause. "That is a significant escalation," Crane said. "I know what it is," Elena said. "What do we need?" Crane was quiet for a moment. That was not hesitation but thought. "Interstate wire transfers," she said, "which we may have in the Crosstech operating account records. International financial structures used in domestic legal proceedings, which the Cayman entities provide even dissolved, and a cooperative witness." She paused, "Which is complicated now." "Thomas cooperated before he burned us," Elena said. "The deposition is recorded. His retraction doesn't erase the recording." "No," Crane said. "It doesn't." "Then we have what we have," Elena said. "And we build from what we have. And we stop waiting for it to be enough, and we go." The line was quiet. "All right," Crane said, with the specific quality of someone who has made a decision and is ready to execute it. "All right," Marcus said. Elena looked at the harbor painting. Gray water. Blue distance. She had come into this thinking it was a divorce. She understood now, completely and without any remaining softness about it, that it was never a divorce. It was a war, and she had just decided to fight it like one. The federal referral went in on a Monday. Crane filed it through her white-collar colleague, a man named David Ossie, who had spent 11 years as an assistant U.S. attorney before going private, and who spoke about wire fraud statutes with the specific fluency of someone who had written the briefs that defined them. He reviewed Marcus's documentation over a weekend, asked 12 precise questions, received 12 precise answers, and told Crane on Sunday evening that the referral had merit and that he would walk it in personally on Monday morning. Elena did not sleep Sunday night. She lay on her left side in the Greystone apartment and listened to the city and felt the baby move slow, exploratory movements, the kind he made when he was awake and turning, and she thought about the harbor painting in the living room and about Damien at his kitchen table in Murray Hill. Years ago, and about Thomas's face in the conference room, when he realized the Cayman entity was already gone, and she had been one move behind the whole time. At 4 a.m, she got up and made tea, and sat at the kitchen table and wrote, by hand on a legal pad, every name she knew to be connected to Damien's financial structure, not for any legal purpose, just to see them all in one place, in her own handwriting, so she could stop turning them over in her head. Damien Cross, Vivian Kane, Thomas Voss. 3 offshore entities, now 2. A CFO named Gerald Fitch, whose name appeared in 3 of the vendor payment records and who Marcus had flagged as someone who either knew everything or had been told exactly enough to make himself useful. She stared at Gerald Fitch's name for a long time. Then she wrote one more name, Preston Marks. Damien's attorney, who had called her and heard her mention the shell structure and the Cayman routing and had gone very quiet on a phone call, in a way that she had read at the time as professional caution. She circled Preston Marks's name. She called Marcus at 4:15. He picked up, which meant he was also not sleeping. Preston Marks, she said. How much does he know about the entities? A pause. She could hear him moving, the sound of a chair, a laptop opening. Why? Because when I mentioned the Cayman structure on the phone, he didn't ask me to clarify, she said. An attorney who didn't know about it would have asked me to clarify. He knew exactly what I was referring to. Another pause. Longer. He may have been brought in earlier than we thought, Marcus said. If he was counsel during the construction of the structure, then he has exposure, Marcus said. And he knows it. Which means, Elena said, that right now, Preston Marks is not just Damien's attorney. He's a man with something to protect. And men with something to protect, Marcus said slowly, make decisions based on that, not on their client. Yes, Elena said, Elena. His voice was careful now. The way it got when he was thinking something he wasn't certain he should say. If Marks has exposure, he has reason to push Damien toward a settlement that ends this quietly, before the federal referral produces anything actionable. That's in Marks's interest, independent of what Damien wants. So we let Marks know that we know, she said. We let Crane know, Marcus said. And we let Crane decide how to communicate it. How soon can that happen? I'll call her at 7, he said. Call her at 6, Elena said. She won't mind. The gala was Vivienne's idea, which was, Elena learned later, the most Vivienne thing about it. It was the Manhattan Philanthropic Forum's annual dinner, a fixture of the city's institutional social calendar, the kind of event where 300 people who ran things gathered in a hotel ballroom and spent 4 hours confirming to each other that they ran things. Crosstech was a sponsor. Had been for 2 years. Damien's name was on the program as a featured guest. The invitations had gone out 6 weeks earlier. Elena had received one at the Greystone address, which meant someone had deliberately updated the mailing. She had set it aside without responding. Marcus found out, through the particular network of information he had cultivated over 18 years in August Voss's orbit, that Vivienne had been coordinating with the event committee not as a guest, but as a crisis communications advisor, managing Crosstech's presence at the event in a way that would reassert Damien's public, standing ahead of what she presumably expected, would be a messy but containable divorce proceeding. Vivienne did not yet know about the federal referral. She did not yet know about Thomas's recorded deposition. She did not yet know that the DA's office had finalized the assault charges and was preparing to serve her within the next 48 hours, a timeline that Crane had specifically engineered to land after the gala, so that Vivienne would spend her last evening as a free professional woman managing a public narrative she was about to lose entirely. August proposed the gala on a Tuesday morning, very calmly the way he proposed most things. No, Asena said immediately. Let me finish, Dad. We are not going to confront anyone, he said. We are going to attend an event to which we were invited, as we have attended this event for 11 years. We are going to bring what Marcus has compiled. And if the opportunity presents itself to establish certain facts in front of an audience that matters the investors, the institutional contacts, the journalists who cover this space, then we will be in the room when that happens. Elena looked at him. You want to do this publicly. The damage to you has been public, he said. The social media campaign was public. The narrative Vivienne has been constructing has been public. The correction should be public as well. It could go wrong, she said. Many things could go wrong, he said. That has not historically been a reason not to act. She thought about this. 8 months pregnant, 3 weeks from her due date, standing in a hotel ballroom full of New York's institutional financial community while her husband's mistress managed the room. If it goes wrong, she said, it makes us look like we're attacking him at a charity dinner. Which is why it won't go wrong, August said, with the particular serenity of someone who has run through the failure modes and found them manageable. Because we won't attack him. We'll present facts. To an audience that evaluates facts professionally. And the footage, she said. Marcus has arranged for the hotel's AV team to be cooperative, August said, in the event that visual evidence becomes relevant. She looked at him for a long moment. You've already planned this, she said. I've prepared for it, he said. There's a distinction. She turned to the window. The baby was pressing against her lower back in the particular way that made standing uncomfortable and sitting equally bad, and lying down the only real option, which was not an option right now. Judith has to know, she said. Judith approves, he said. She suggested the timing. Of course she had. Elena turned back. I'll need something to wear, she said. That fits. The hotel was the Meridian, on Park Avenue, 16 floors of pale stone and glass, that the city's philanthropic establishment had been using for 30 years because it had the right kind of grand without tipping into ostentatious. The ballroom was on the 3rd floor, chandeliers and round tables, and a stage at the far end where the evening's program would eventually happen, the usual sequence of remarks and recognitions and video presentations. They arrived at 7:15. Elena, in deep navy, a dress that had cost more than she would normally spend, and fit her 8 months pregnant body with the kind of precision that required a specific kind of tailor and a specific amount of money. August in his charcoal suit, which was what he always wore. Marcus 3 steps behind, moving like someone who was tracking multiple things at once, which he was. The room registered their arrival. Elena felt it not dramatically, not with any visible ripple, but in the small adjustments people made, the slight redirections of attention, the conversations that paused and restarted, the particular stillness that moved through a room when someone entered it who was known to have recently had a difficult public experience. New York's institutional class was not unkind about these things, but it was attentive. She kept her chin level. She accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. She talked to 2 people she recognized from industry teacher events and said nothing about anything except the kind of nothing that high-function social events required. And she did it smoothly because she had been doing it since she was 22. She saw Damien from across the room at 7:40. He was in a cluster near the bar, 3 other people, all men, all in the business of money in one form or another. He was talking with the posture of someone who had decided to present confidence as a fait accompli, and it was working, because it usually did. He was very good at rooms. He always had been. He hadn't seen her yet. She watched him for a moment and felt nothing dramatic. No lurch of the old feeling, no residue of what she had once called love, which she now understood had been at least partially her own projection, onto a man who was better at reflecting what you wanted to see than at being anything specific. She felt tired. She felt clear. She felt the baby press against her ribs, and she shifted her weight slightly and kept watching. Then he turned and saw her. Across 30 feet of ballroom, past the moving bodies, and the ambient noise of 300 people in formal wear, his face did the thing she had been waiting for it to do. It showed briefly and unmistakably fear. Not guilt, not regret. Fear, the specific fear of a man who has built something complicated and well hidden, and has just seen the person most motivated to dismantle it walk into the room looking like she has already won. He said something to the men he was with, made an excuse she couldn't hear, and then he moved toward her, and she stood her ground, and August materialized at her left side, without her having to say anything. Damien stopped 2 feet away. "Elena," he said. His voice was controlled. "I didn't know you were coming." "I was invited," she said. His eyes moved to August. Something passed between the 2 men, not a greeting. The specific recognition of 2 people who have been in opposition long enough to have learned each other's weight. "August," August said nothing. "This isn't the place," Damien said back to Elena. "You keep attending places where I'm present," she said. "If you wanted a place that wasn't complicated, you had options. I'm telling you for your own." He stopped. His jaw tightened. "This event is professionally important, and you know that. Coming here with him like this, I came because I was invited to an event I've attended for years," she said. "If my presence here damages your professional standing, Damien, I'd encourage you to think carefully about why that is." His eyes moved past her. She knew he was looking for Vivienne. "She's here," Elena said. "I know, I saw her by the stage." Damien looked back at her. Something behind his eyes had changed the calculation working, running through variables, coming up against a wall it hadn't expected. "What are you doing?" he said, very quietly. "Just for her." "What I should have done months ago," she said, equally quiet. Standing in rooms, he held her gaze for another 2 seconds. Then he walked away. At 8:30, during the cocktail portion that preceded the formal dinner, Marcus appeared at Elena's side, with his phone screen angled toward her. The federal referral had been formally acknowledged. Not acted on, that would take weeks, but acknowledged, which meant it was now a document in a federal system with a case number attached to it. OC had sent Crane a one-line confirmation. Crane had sent Marcus. Marcus had walked it to Elena. She read the text, handed the phone back. "All right," she said. Across the room she could see Vivienne now, in black, impeccable, working the room with the smooth efficiency of someone who did it professionally because she did, moving from cluster to cluster, touching arms, laughing at the right moments, her face doing the calibrated warmth that was her professional signature. She had not yet looked in Elena's direction, but she would. The program started at 9. 3 speakers, standard format, the kind of remarks that philanthropic dinners required and that no one fully listened to. Elena sat at a table with August and Marcus and 2 other couples she had known peripherally through the Voss Capital network, and she ate what was put in front of her because the baby needed her to, and because she was not going to let this night be, the night she stopped eating. Damien was at a table diagonally across the room. Vivian was not at his table. They had been careful about that, publicly, for as long as Elena had known about them. She was 3 tables further, angled so that she had a clear line of sight to Damien, without being obviously associated. Elena had mapped this within the first 10 minutes. The program moved to a video presentation. Crosstech was being recognized for its charitable giving. A segment, 60 seconds of branded content and polished narration. Damien stood briefly when his company's name was mentioned, acknowledged the room with a nod, sat back down. Elena watched the screen. Marcus had arranged it with the hotel's AV coordinator 2 days ago. Not a bribe, nothing so crude. An understanding communicated through a specific channel that there was additional material relevant to the event's featured guest that the committee might wish to be aware of before the evening concluded. The coordinator had reviewed it, had made a call to the committee chair. The committee chair had made a call that Elena had not been party to and had not needed to be. What happened at 9:47 was not unplanned. The video finished. The moderator returned to the stage. He said, with the particular careful phrasing of someone reading something he had been handed recently, "Before we proceed to the evening's final program, there is a matter that the event committee believes the attendees here tonight, as members of this city's financial and philanthropic community, should be given the opportunity to consider directly." The room shifted. Not dramatically, this was a professional crowd, trained to listen without showing that they were listening. But the shift was real. The screen, which had gone dark after the Crosstech segment, lit up again. It showed the 4th-floor waiting room of Mercy General Hospital. High angle, wide lens, fluorescent light. It showed Elena walking in, sitting down, picking up a magazine. It showed the elevator opening. It showed Vivian Kane cross the room in 12 steps and put both hands flat against a pregnant woman's shoulders and shove her into a metal armrest. The footage ran for 44 seconds. Then it stopped. The room was completely silent. Not the polite silence of an audience following a program. The specific silence of 300 people who have just processed something they cannot unhear. Elena did not look at Damien. She looked at the screen. Then she heard Vivian's voice from across the room, sharp, too loud, breaking the silence in the worst possible way. "That footage is out of context." "Sit down," the moderator firmly. "That is a selectively edited, Miss Kane." The voice from the committee chair at a table near the stage. "Please." Vivian stopped. The room's attention was on her now. 300 faces turned in her direction, and Elena finally looked at her and saw what she had not expected to see. Not composure, not the calibrated professionalism that Vivian wielded, like a tool in every room she had ever been in, but something raw and cornered and suddenly very visible. Marcus moved to the stage. He had been asked by the committee chair to speak briefly. He had agreed. He was not a man who sought stages, but he was a man who could stand on one without flinching, and he did it now with the same quality he brought to everything precise, unperformed, exactly as long as it needed to be. He introduced himself. He described his role with Voss Capital. He described the documentation they had compiled over the preceding weeks, not the financial detail. Not yet, not here, but the fact of it, the scale of it, the pattern it described. He said that the woman who had been shoved in that footage had been the subject of an organized online campaign in the days following the assault. He said that the people behind that campaign were known. He said that the documentation was in the hands of appropriate legal authorities. He said it all in 4 minutes. Then he stepped off the stage. The room did not applaud. Rooms like this didn't applaud things like that. But the quality of its silence told him everything he needed to know about whether it had landed. Damien stood up. He was halfway to the stage. Elena could see him moving, could see the set of his shoulders, the jaw, the particular forward lean of a man who has decided that speaking is better than not speaking, and has not yet realized that he is wrong when Preston Marks appeared at his side. She couldn't hear what Marks said. She could see Damien's face as he heard it, could see the moment the words landed, the small, terrible contraction of his expression, the hand that came up and gripped Marks' arm. The response that Marks gave with a single, small shake of his head. The federal referral. Marks had just told him. Damien stopped moving toward the stage. He stood in the middle of the ballroom, between his table and the podium, and for one very brief, very human moment, he looked like exactly what he was. A man who had been running a calculation for 2 years, and had just discovered that the numbers were wrong. Then he looked across the room and found Elena. She was looking back at him. She did not feel triumphant. She had expected to feel something like triumph, and instead she felt the particular exhaustion of someone who has carried in something very heavy for a very long time and has just been told they can set it down, but their arms still hurt. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked away. Vivienne left the room. Elena heard the doors, heard the particular sound of heels on marble in a corridor, and then there was a separate sound voices, a woman's voice raised, the specific escalation that security had apparently been waiting for, positioned in the corridor for exactly the contingency, because Marcus had arranged for them to be there. Elena looked at Marcus. He was looking at his phone. A text. He showed her the screen. She's being detained for questioning. DA's office was waiting outside. Elena looked at the message. Then at August, who was sitting beside her with his coffee, his face giving away nothing, the way it gave away nothing when he was watching something he had prepared for, arrive exactly as anticipated. Dad, she said. He looked at her. The baby, she said. Because she had felt it a different sensation than the movement she was used to, a tightening, low and deep and unmistakable, the kind that Dr. Shaw had described in specific clinical language during their last appointment. August set his cup down. How far apart, he said. Not panicking. Asking, I don't know yet, she said. It's Marcus. August was already standing, I heard, Marcus said. He was on his phone. The hospital, Elena said. Mercy General, Dr. Shaw. I'm calling, Marcus said. Elena put both hands flat on the table and breathed through the contraction, which lasted approximately 40 seconds, and then released, leaving behind a residual ache and the specific clarity of a body announcing that whatever else was happening tonight, it had its own timeline and was not interested in negotiating. Around her, the ballroom continued its disrupted evening voices rising and falling. The committee chair at the stage saying something into a microphone. The social machinery of 300 people processing an event none of them had expected. She breathed. The baby pressed against her ribs. Okay, she said, to him, to herself, to the room and the night, and the long chain of decisions that had brought her to this chair in this ballroom at this moment. Okay, let's go. August had her coat, Marcus had the car. The doors of the Meridian Hotel opened onto Park Avenue, and the night was cold and clear, and somewhere across the city, in a building she would never return to, Damien Cross was standing in a ballroom that no longer contained her, understanding for the first time completely, without any remaining room for misreading that he had already lost. Elena walked out into the cold air and felt another contraction begin, and she held August's arm and kept moving, and the city was loud and indifferent and alive around her, and she was still in it, still standing, still here. Elliot Voss Cross was born at 2:47 in the morning. He came into the world at Mercy General, the same building, where his mother had been shoved into a metal armrest 11 weeks earlier in a delivery room on the 6th floor with Dr. Shaw at the foot of the bed and August Voss sitting in a chair in the corridor outside, because Elena had asked him to wait there, and he had, without argument, which was perhaps the most significant thing he had done for her in years. The labor was 14 hours, not easy. Nothing about the preceding months had been easy, and the delivery held to that pattern, with a consistency Elena might have found darkly funny if she'd had any energy left for dark humor. She did not. She had energy for breathing and pushing, and at one point around hour 11, telling a nurse in a very quiet voice that she needed everyone to stop talking for approximately 90 seconds, which they did. Elliot arrived squalling, which Dr. Shaw said was exactly right, which was what doctors said, and which Elena understood intellectually and felt in her chest in a way that had nothing to do with intellect. They put him on her chest. She had prepared herself, in the particular way. She prepared for things practically, systematically, with a list of what to expect and a clear-eyed acknowledgement that she would likely feel overwhelmed. She had not prepared for the specific weight of him, the specific warmth, the way he stopped making noise almost immediately when he was against her skin, and simply breathed, fast and shallow and alive, like he had been somewhere very busy, and was relieved to have arrived somewhere quiet. She held him. August was brought in 20 minutes later. He stood at the foot of the bed for a moment in his charcoal suit, which now had the particular rumpled quality of a charcoal suit that had been worn for 19 hours straight, and he looked at his daughter and his grandson, and his face did something she did not have a name for and had never seen it do before. He sat down in the chair beside the bed without being asked. Elliot, Elena said. Not asking, just saying the name, the first time she'd said it aloud in the presence of the person it belonged to. Elliot, August repeated, very quietly. Nobody said anything else for a while. The legal proceedings that followed the gala did not move quickly because legal proceedings never moved quickly, and Elena had adjusted her expectations on that front early enough that the pace did not break her. What moved immediately was the social landscape. The footage from the Meridian Ballroom, not from the gala's own cameras, but from 3 separate phones in the room that night, all of which found their way onto social platforms within hours, reset the public narrative in the way that only first-hand documentation could. Not the edited, managed version that Vivienne had spent months constructing. The raw version, a very pregnant woman sitting in a hospital waiting room, a deliberate shove, the unmistakable geometry of a decision. The anonymous social media accounts calling Elena unstable went quiet within 48 hours. 2 of them were deleted. The fake medical document that had been circulating disappeared from the platforms that had hosted it and was replaced, in the search results that mattered, by the gala footage and the credible reporting that followed it. Vivienne had been detained outside the Meridian for 2 hours on the night of the gala, questioned and released pending formal processing of the DA's charges. The assault charge 2nd degree, given the pregnancy was filed 4 days later. Her attorney issued a statement describing the charge as politically motivated and the gala event as an orchestrated ambush, which was not entirely wrong about the orchestration and entirely wrong about the motivation. Elena read the statement in the Greystone apartment, with Elliot asleep on her chest, 6 days old, and set her phone face down, picked it back up. She called Judith Crane. The statement, she said. I've read it, Crane said. It's aggressive positioning. Expected. Her attorney is very good. How good? Good enough to delay the criminal proceedings for several months, Crane said. Not good enough to make the footage disappear. What about the federal side? OC tells me they're building their case methodically, Crane said. They've issued document requests to Crosstech. Gerald Fitch, the CFO, lawyered up immediately, which is interesting. Fitch lawyered up and Damien didn't. Damien's position is that he has nothing to hide, Crane said, with a dryness that communicated exactly what she thought of that position. He's going to make Preston Marks argue that, Elena said. Preston Marks has already filed 2 motions in the family court proceedings that are, let's say, creative in their framing of the asset disclosure requirements, Crane said. I've responded to both. The judge is not impressed. Elena shifted Elliot slightly. He made a small sound, not quite a complaint, and resettled. What do I need to do, Elena said. You need to recover from childbirth, Crane said, and you need to prepare for a deposition that Marks is going to request within the next 3 weeks. He's going to try to establish that the gala was a calculated attack on his client's professional standing. It was, Elena said. Yes, Crane said. But the question is whether it was an appropriate response to a documented pattern of harassment, intimidation, and financial misconduct, which it was, and which I can establish. But I need you sharp. I'll be sharp, Elena said. I know, Crane said. Get some sleep. Thomas came to the Greystone on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after the gala, 2 weeks after Elliot's birth. He called ahead, which was not something he had historically done with family, and Elena understood this as a form of acknowledgement that the old assumptions of access no longer applied. She let him come. He arrived with nothing. No flowers, no gift for the baby, which she appreciated in the way she appreciated things that were at least honest. He stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at her, sitting on the couch, with Elliot in her arms, and he had the look of a man who had rehearsed this conversation many times and understood that none of the rehearsals were going to be useful. Sit down, she said. He sat in the chair across from her. He was thinner than he'd been at the conference room meeting. He had the specific pallor of someone who had not been sleeping in a way that was physical, visible, written in the skin. His name is Elliot, she said, because Thomas had been staring at the baby with something that looked like it needed an opening. I know, Thomas said. Dad told me. Have you spoken to Dad? Once, Thomas said. On the phone. It was he stopped. Short. She could imagine. She had been present for enough of August's short phone calls to understand what Thomas meant. Your deposition, she said. Crane tells me you've been cooperative. I told them everything, Thomas said. The complete version. Not the conference room version. She looked at him. What was different? He looked at his hands. The conference room version left out how much I understood about what Damien was doing with the money. I told myself I didn't know about the payments to Vivian specifically, which was true. But I knew the entities weren't purely structural. I knew they were being used to move money, that was I knew. And you let it happen, she said. I let it happen, he said. Because of the failed investment. Because of the failed investment, he said. And because I wanted, he stopped again. Longer this time. Because I wanted something of my own that didn't come from Dad. And Damien offered me something that looked like that. Elena looked at her son. At the weight of him in her arms, his face slack and trusting in sleep, the particular perfection of his unawareness of everything that had happened to bring him to this moment. You gave Damien access to the Voss name, she said. And Damien used the Voss name to give investors a comfort level they shouldn't have had. And the money that came in on that comfort level got moved through structures that you were registered on. She paused. And somewhere in all of that, it didn't occur to you that if it went wrong, your sister was the one who would pay for it. Thomas looked at her directly for the first time since he'd sat down. His eyes were red-rimmed. She was not moved by this. She noted it and set it aside. It occurred to me, he said. I told myself you'd be fine, that the marriage would either work out or it wouldn't, and that Damien would handle the financial side cleanly regardless. I told myself that because I needed to. I know, she said. He looked at her with something that was not quite surprise. You're not, he paused. I expected more from you. More anger? More everything. She shifted Elliot. He stirred, briefly, and she made a small automatic sound, and he settled. I'm tired, Thomas, she said. I have a 3-week-old and a deposition coming, and 2 sets of legal proceedings, and I've been running on 4 hours of sleep since before the gala. I don't have the energy for more. She paused. What I have is this. You told them the truth eventually. The damage you caused is real, and the legal consequences for it are real, and I'm not going to intervene in those. But you're my brother. That doesn't disappear. He was quiet for a moment. What does it mean, he said. That I'm your brother, right now. It means, she said carefully, that when this is over, all of it, the proceedings, the legal outcome, whatever that is, there's a possibility of something. I don't know what. I'm not making promises, but the possibility exists. Because of him, Thomas said, looking at Elliot. Partly, she said. Partly just because I'm not interested in spending the rest of my life in a war with my own family. Thomas nodded. He looked like he had more to say and was deciding not to say it, which was the right decision. Go home, she said. Talk to your attorney. Do what they tell you to do. And she paused. Don't do anything with Damien. No contact, whatever he offers you. He hasn't offered me anything, Thomas said. He hasn't contacted me since the gala. He will, she said, when his position gets bad enough. Thomas looked at her. How do you know? Because that's what he does, she said. He finds the person nearest to what he needs, and he makes them feel like cooperation is in their interest. It worked twice. Don't let it work a third time. Thomas stood. He stood at the edge of the room for a moment, and she thought he might say something else, something that would require her to respond, and she was genuinely uncertain whether she had anything left to respond with. But he just looked at Elliot one long look, the way you looked at something you understood you had nearly helped destroy, and then he left. The deposition was on a Tuesday in February. Elena sat across a conference table from Preston Marks and answered every question he asked her, in the voice she used when she needed to be completely accurate and completely unreadable simultaneously. He was thorough. She had expected thorough. He spent 40 minutes on the gala, establishing the sequence of events, trying to build toward a narrative of premeditation and malice. She answered each question with the specific literal truth of what she had done and why, which dismantled the narrative without her having to argue against it. At one point, Mark said, "You were aware that your attendance at the event would create a confrontation with your husband. I was aware that my husband would be present," she said. "I came to an event I was invited to. If my presence created a confrontation, the confrontation was created by the circumstances my husband had established, not by my attendance." Marks looked at her. "You prepared the AV presentation in advance," he said. "The committee was made aware of existing documentation," she said. "The decision about how to present it was theirs. You provided the hospital footage. My attorney provided a certified copy of the footage, which is legally public record in the context of an active criminal charge," she said. "Yes." Marks shifted his papers. She could see in the small movements of his hands a tell She had noticed within the first 10 minutes that the deposition was not going the way he had hoped. Near the end, he tried something different. "Mrs. Cross," he said, "do you believe your husband intended for Vivian Kane to physically assault you?" She looked at him. "No," she said. "I think he intended for her to intimidate me. I think she went further than he anticipated. I think the distinction does not meaningfully reduce his responsibility for creating the conditions in which it happened." Marks wrote something down. "Do you have any interest in reconciliation?" he said. It was the last question. She recognized it as a probe looking for ambivalence, for anything he could use to suggest that the proceedings were being driven by external pressure rather than her own settled determination. "No," she said, "none at all." "None," she said. "I have a son. I have a life to build. I have no interest in anything that went before." The divorce was finalized in March, and it was not clean, because it was never going to be clean, but it was done. The financial settlement took 6 weeks of negotiation that Crane described, with professional restraint, as contentious, and that Marcus described, privately to Elena, as the most exhausting sustained legal combat he had witnessed in 2 decades of watching August Voss operate. Damien's position was complicated enormously by the federal investigation, which had produced a civil parallel action that ran alongside the divorce proceedings and forced a level of financial disclosure that the shell structure had been specifically designed to prevent. Gerald Fitch, Crosstech's CFO, reached a cooperation agreement with federal investigators in late February. What Fitch knew was considerably more than what Thomas had known, and what Fitch disclosed substantially corroborated and extended the documentation Marcus had compiled. The 3-letter restructuring that Damien and Vivienne had attempted. In the days after Elena's hospital visit, the entity dissolution, the trail clearing was reconstructed through wire transfer records and authenticated by 2 independent forensic accountants. Damien's attorneys negotiated hard. Preston Marks was, as Crane had said, thorough and not unethical, and he found every legitimate structural argument available and used each one precisely. It bought his client time and a somewhat more favorable settlement posture than he would otherwise have had. It did not change the fundamental picture. The settlement included a full accounting of marital assets, including those that had been routed through the shell structure. Damien paid. The amount was not public. Elena did not make it public because it was not the point, had never been the point, and she was not interested in the kind of victory that required an audience. Crosstech as a company did not immediately collapse. Companies like Crosstech rarely collapsed immediately. What happened was slower, and in some ways more complete. The institutional investors who had attended the Meridian Gala, and the ones who had not attended but had seen the footage, and the analysts who covered the technology sector and did not enjoy being made to look like they had missed something, applied the particular pressure that institutional investors and analysts applied when they had concluded that a company's leadership had become a liability. Damien stepped down as CEO in April, nominally voluntarily, in the careful language of corporate transitions that describe what was happening as a strategic evolution. He left Manhattan. She heard this from Marcus, who heard it from someone in the financial network, and she received the information and filed it, and did not think about it extensively. She had Elliot and the apartment she had eventually returned to her own, not the Greystone, with the doorman, who buzzed up delivery people, and the windows that faced east, and the kitchen she had painted herself, the color of a late afternoon. She and August worked on that kitchen together, on a Saturday in April, because one of the walls needed a second coat, and because August had appeared at her door with a paint roller, and no explanation, and she had let him in, because she had decided that letting him in was the version of her father she could live with. He was not good at painting. He held the roller with the precision of someone who did not do physical tasks with his hands and had not for many years, and the results were uneven, and she had to go back over 2 sections he did. He said, "I should have listened to you when you were young." She was on the stepladder, fixing his section near the ceiling. She did not pretend she didn't know what he meant. "Which time?" she said. "When you wanted to study architecture," he said. "And I told you it wasn't a practical path for someone with your name." She kept painting. The roller moved in its long, even strokes. She had done this before and she was competent at it. "I wanted to be useful," she said. "That's all. I wanted to make things that were real. Not money, not connections. Things you could stand in." "I know," he said. "I knew then too. I just stopped." He was staring at the roller in his hand like it had said something to him. "I made you in my image and then was surprised when you didn't fit it." She came down from the stepladder. "You also showed up," she said. "In the hospital. You picked up on the second ring. He looked at her. That counts, she said. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't count. August Voss, 63 years old, $11 billion under management, 3 decades of operating at the exact center of institutional financial power, looked at his daughter for a moment with an expression she had seen only once before, in the delivery room, in the chair beside the bed, and then he went back to the wall and attempted the second coat with renewed determination and still insufficient technique, and she went back up the ladder and fixed it behind him. And that was, she understood, as close as the two of them were going to get to the conversation they had needed to have for 20 years. It was enough. Vivian's trial began in May and concluded in 6 days. The footage was the footage. Her attorney's argument context, selective editing, an altercation that was mutual collapsed against the specific testimony of the nurses who had been present and the reception desk staff member who had been on the phone with hospital security before Vivienne reached the elevator. The forensic analysis of the social media accounts traced 2 of them to devices registered to Vivienne's company. The fake medical document was analyzed and determined to be manufactured from a template that existed in the same document system her company used for client materials. She was convicted on the assault charge and 2 counts related to the coordinated harassment campaign. Her attorney filed the appeal within 48 hours. The appeal would take time. In the meantime, the conviction existed, and the professional consequences of it did not wait for the appeal. Elena was not in the courtroom for the verdict. She was in a park 11 blocks away, sitting on a bench with Elliot in his stroller, watching pigeons do what pigeons did. Marcus called her with the word guilty, all 3 counts, and she said thank you and hung up and sat there for a while. She thought about the waiting room, the magazine she had been reading without reading, the sound of heels on hospital tile, the specific sensation of being shoved, of the armrest catching her, of looking up and seeing Vivienne's face show that brief flash of something that had gone further than intended. She thought about the hospital footage playing in that ballroom, in front of 300 people, and how she had watched it and felt not vindicated, which she had expected to feel, but documented. Like something that had happened to her in a room with no witnesses, had been given back its witnesses. Elliot made a sound from the stroller. She leaned over and looked at him. He was awake, looking up at the sky with the concentrated expression he wore when something was happening above his sightline. Clouds or leaves, or the particular quality of light through bare spring branches. I know, she said. It's a lot. He kept staring at the sky. The Voss Maternal Safety Initiative was August's suggestion in function, but Elena's in form, which was the only version of it she would agree to. She had heard the phrase maternal safety and had understood immediately what kind of organization it could be and what kind it would become if she wasn't careful. A charitable vehicle attached to a family name, well-funded and well-meaning, and fundamentally about the people who ran it rather than the people it served. She had seen enough of those to know what they looked like from the inside. What she built instead was smaller and more specific. It started with 3 hospitals, Mercy General among them, and a program that placed trained patient advocates in maternity waiting areas and labor and delivery wards, people whose job was to be present, available, and specifically attuned to the vulnerability of patients who were there alone, who didn't have a partner or had one who wasn't coming, who were navigating pregnancy and its attendant fears in the particular isolation that came from not having the right person in the chair beside them. She funded it with the settlement money, partly, and with her own resources, and with a contribution from August that he made without attaching conditions to it, which was new. She became its public face, not because August suggested it, or Marcus recommended it, or Crane thought it was strategically useful, but because a journalist from a national publication reached out to interview her, and she said yes, because she had thought about it for 2 days, and decided that the story of what had happened to her was not hers to keep private, if telling it might reach a woman sitting alone in a maternity waiting room, afraid and without anyone to call. The interview was published in June. The response was she had not expected what it was. Letters, mostly forwarded through the organization's contact address. Women who had been in rooms alone. Women who had called someone who hadn't picked up. Women who had built lives out of what had tried to reduce them, and who were writing to say they recognized what she had described, and that recognition felt, to them, like something. She read every one. She was reading them one evening, late, with Elliot asleep in the next room and the apartment quiet around her, when Marcus called. The federal case, he said. There's a development. Damien had reached a cooperation agreement with federal investigators. The details would come out over time, But the substance was this. In exchange for reduced personal exposure, he had provided complete documentation of the shell structure, the beneficial ownership layers, the money flows, the instructions to Gerald Fitch, and the coordination with Vivienne's company. Everything. The version of everything that Thomas had not known, and Fitch had only partially disclosed. He gave them Vivienne, Marcus said. Elena was quiet. Completely, Marcus said. Her involvement in the financial structure was deeper than we knew. She wasn't just a vendor. She had equity in 2 of the entities. She had been directing the movement of funds independently of Damien for at least 8 months. She was running it, Elena said slowly. Partly, Marcus said. It was collaborative. But the 8 months of independent activity that predates the gala, that predates the assault charge. She was maneuvering financially even before. Before she came to my appointment, Elena said. Before she came to your appointment, Marcus confirmed. Elena absorbed this. She looked at the stack of letters on the coffee table. He gave her to them to reduce his own exposure, she said. Yes, Marcus said, and she'll face additional charges. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. How much does it help him? Meaningfully, Marcus said. He's not going to walk away clean. There will be fines, disgorgement, a consent decree. Criminal exposure is significantly reduced by the cooperation. He'll rebuild eventually in a smaller way. She had known this was a possible outcome. Crane had told her early on that cooperation was a card Damien might play, that the system rewarded it, that the reward was not fair, but it was real. Okay, she said, you're not... Marcus paused. You're okay with that? No, she said. I'm not okay with it. But I understand it, and I'm not going to spend energy being angry about the parts of the legal system I can't change. She paused. He lost the company. He lost his standing. She stopped. He lost me. And I was the best part of what he had. And he knew it, and he still chose this. The system giving him a partial break on the criminal side doesn't undo any of that. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Elliot's good, he said. Elliot's good, she said. He figured out laughing this week. It sounds like hiccups with ambitions. Marcus laughed. He was not a man who laughed easily, and she had always taken it as a genuine thing when he did. Good night, Marcus, she said. Good night, he said. In July, when Elliot was 4 months old and had achieved the approximate density of a bag of rice that had opinions about everything, Elena took him to the park on a Tuesday afternoon and sat on the same bench she had sat on when the verdict came in. She had thought she might feel something specific here, a conclusion. The narrative-adjacent sensation of sitting in a place where you had received important news and being able to say, now I know what came after. What she felt instead was just the afternoon. The particular quality of New York in July, the heat that sat on everything, the smell of the linden trees that lined the path, the sound of the city going about itself. Elliot in his stroller, awake, watching the leaves do their thing in the light. She thought about Damien, not with longing, not with the residue of what they had been. She thought about him, the way you thought about a chapter that was over, not a closed wound, exactly, not clean, but healed to the point where it was part of her, rather than something separate and ongoing that she had to work around. She thought about the woman she had been in that waiting room, the woman who had made herself small, who had kept her voice even, who had sat alone at 11 prenatal appointments and told nurses that her husband had board meetings, who had seen things clearly and chosen not to see them because the alternative required her to dismantle her own life with her own hands. She was not angry at that woman. She was done being impatient with her. She had been doing the best she could with what she knew at the time, and then she had done better when she knew more. And that was all anyone could do, and she was not going to spend whatever came next measuring herself against what should have been different earlier. Elliot reached up from the stroller with one small hand toward the leaves overhead, the concentrated reachings of someone for whom everything is still new and worth trying to touch. She caught his hand and held it. He turned and looked at her, that direct, unperformed look that very young babies had, before they learned to modulate what they showed on their faces, before the world taught them that looking was complicated and required management. He just looked at her, like she was sufficient, like she was exactly what was needed in this moment. She held his hand, and the afternoon moved around them, and the city made its sounds, and somewhere across it, people were going through their days and building their calculations, and making their choices and paying their prices. And here on this bench, in the particular stillness of a mother and a child, in the summer light, Elena Cross, who was also Elena Voss, who was also just Elena, who had been shoved and threatened and reduced and had refused, finally and completely, to be reduced, sat and breathed, and let the afternoon be what it was. quiet, real, hers. She stayed on the bench until the light changed. That was how she measured time now, in the months since Elliot arrived, not by the clock, which she still checked compulsively out of old professional habit, but by the quality of the light, the way it moved across the park, and changed the color of things incrementally, the way that watching it was something you could do with a baby in a stroller without feeling like you were failing to do something else. The afternoon light in July had a particular slant to it after 4 o'clock, lower and warmer, the kind that made ordinary things pavement, leaves, the metal frame of a park bench look briefly like they were made of something more valuable than they were. She'd always noticed light. It was a remnant of the architecture years, of the professors who had taught her to read how a building breathed, how a space changed character across the hours of a day. She had not become an architect, but she had kept the way of looking. Elliot fell asleep somewhere around 4:30, abruptly and completely, the way he did everything total commitment, no transition. One moment he was tracking a pigeon with the focused intensity of a naturalist. The next he was gone. Hands relaxed, face slack, making the small breathing sounds that she had memorized without trying to. She sat with the sleeping baby and the changing light, and she let herself think about what came next. Not the proceedings, those were ongoing and would be for months, and she had craned for those and had learned to file them in the part of her mind that was organized and attended to and not constantly present. Not the organization, which had its own operational life now, a small staff of 4, a board that August chaired with the specific competence of someone who had run boards for 30 years and could do it with one hand. She thought about what came next for her. For the version of her that wasn't defined by any of this, she had been thinking slowly and without urgency about the architecture question. Not going back to school, she was 38 years old and practical about what that would and wouldn't accomplish. But there was a woman she had known in her mid-20s, a partner at a small firm that did civic projects, schools and libraries and community health spaces, who had reached out after the interview was published with a message that was direct and ungushing. The way Elena preferred messages, "I've been thinking about a specific kind of project, and I think you'd understand what I'm trying to do. If you have 30 minutes, I'd like to talk." She had not yet responded. She took out her phone and looked at the message again. She wrote back, "I have 30 minutes on Thursday. Tell me about the project." She put the phone in her bag. August came for dinner on Wednesdays. This had begun without either of them deciding it. He had appeared one Wednesday in March with food from the restaurant on Amsterdam Avenue that he had been ordering from since the 90s, and she had let him in, and they had eaten at the kitchen table with Elliot in the bouncy chair. Marcus had assembled with the focused determination of a man who did not read instructions on principle, but could figure out anything eventually. And then August had come back the following Wednesday with food from a different restaurant, and the Wednesday after that. And by the time either of them might have acknowledged that it had become a pattern, it had been a pattern long enough that acknowledging it seemed unnecessary. He held Elliot differently now than he had in the beginning. In the hospital, in those first hours, he had held him with the particular careful tension of someone who understood that the object was fragile and important and didn't entirely trust himself with it. Now he held him the way he held things that belonged to him, which was to say, securely, without apology, the way August Voss held everything he claimed. Elliot, for his part, had decided that August was interesting. He tracked him across rooms. He made sounds when August talked, not responsive sounds exactly, but participation sounds, the vocal equivalent of leaning forward. "He thinks you're saying something," Elena told August one evening. "I am saying something," August said. He was telling Elliot, in the measured cadences he used for everything, about a bond issue from 1987 that had restructured 3 Midwestern utility companies. He's attentive. He doesn't understand words yet. He understands tone, August said. Tone is most of it anyway. This was, Elena thought, either the most reductive thing he'd ever said or the most insightful. And she had learned that with August Voss, those two things were often the same thing. They talked more on Wednesdays than they had in the preceding decade combined. Not about the proceedings, there was an unspoken agreement that Wednesday dinner was not for the proceedings. They talked about other things, companies August was watching, books Elena had been trying to read in the 20-minute windows Elliot allowed, a renovation August was considering for the Greystone that he wanted her input on, which she understood as an offering and received as one. One Wednesday in July, he said, "Over the remnants of an unremarkable pasta, your mother would have liked him." Elena's mother had died when Elena was 19. A fast illness, the kind that didn't allow for long goodbyes. She had been a woman of considerable warmth and considerable precision, who had managed the particular difficulty of being married to August Voss by being, in her own way, equally immovable. Elena looked at Elliot, asleep in the bouncy chair, with one fist near his ear. She would have been insufferable about him, Elena said, in the best way. Yes, August said. She would have been here every day. You would have complained about it. Constantly, he said, and been glad of it. Elena looked at her father. He was looking at the baby with the expression she still didn't have a name for, the one that had appeared in the delivery room and kept returning. You could come more than Wednesdays, she said. If you wanted. He looked at her. Not every day, she said. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, she agreed. He nodded, once with the finality he brought to decisions, and picked up his wine. She met with the architect on a Thursday morning. Her name was Rosa Delaney, 53, with the specific physical quality of someone who spent a lot of time on construction sites, practical shoes, capable hands, a way of looking at spaces rather than through them. She had been working for 15 years on projects that existed at the intersection of architecture and public health, a community clinic in the Bronx, 2 school renovations in Brooklyn, a proposal for a maternal health center in Upper Manhattan that had been moving through city approval processes for 3 years and had stalled twice for funding reasons. They met at the firm, which was 4 people in a second-floor walk-up in the West Village, with drafting tables and a kitchen that looked like it had been an afterthought, and structural drawings pinned to every available wall surface. Elena liked it immediately, the productive disorder of it, the evidence that the work happened here, rather than being imported from somewhere more impressive. Rosa showed her the maternal health center proposal. It was not an imposing building. That was the first thing Elena noticed, and the thing that kept her attention. It was designed to be approachable, not small, but scaled to the human body rather than to institutional authority. Natural light throughout. Waiting areas that didn't feel like waiting areas. A garden-level space that could be a community room or a recovery room, depending on the day's need. It's been stuck on Phase 2 funding for 8 months, Rosa said. The city portion is committed. The gap is private. Elena looked at the drawings for a long time. The waiting areas, she said. The design here, she pointed. The sight lines. Was that deliberate? Always, Rosa said. I wanted a person sitting anywhere in that room to be able to see the entrance and the exterior simultaneously, so they don't feel enclosed. Elena looked up. I know something about maternity waiting areas, she said. I know, Rosa said. I read your interview. They talked for 2 hours. Elena asked questions that Rosa answered specifically, and Rosa asked questions that Elena answered specifically, and at no point did either of them speak in the language of opportunity and partnership and vision, which Elena appreciated deeply. At the end, Rosa said, the funding gap is $400,000. I've been at it for 8 months, and I'm at the point where I'm either going to find it in the next 60 days, or I'm going to have to let the design contract lapse and start over. Elena looked at the drawings one more time. The waiting areas with their sight lines. The garden level. The light. Send me the full proposal, she said. The financial model and the design documentation both. I'll read it this week. And then Rosa said, and then I'll tell you what I think, Elena said. Rosa studied her for a moment. You're not going to tell me yes or no today. No, Elena said. I don't make decisions about things that matter in the first meeting. Rosa nodded slowly. Fair, Elena stood and gathered her coat. She paused at the door. The sight lines, she said. In the waiting room design. The idea that a person sitting alone should be able to see the door and the outside at the same time. She paused. That's the whole thing. That's what it needs to feel like. Rosa looked at her. Yes, she said. That's the whole thing. The proposal arrived by email that evening. Elena read it after Elliot's last feeding, in the kitchen, with the apartment quiet around her, and the city doing its nighttime business outside the windows. She read it twice. The financial model was solid. The design documentation was meticulous. The community need analysis cited 10 years of maternal health data from Upper Manhattan that painted a picture she recognized not from statistics, but from the letters that still came to the organizations. Contact address. The women who had been in rooms alone. She closed the laptop. She sat in the kitchen for a while. She thought about the woman in the maternity waiting room, 11 weeks ago. The magazine she had been reading without reading. The sound of heels. The 12 steps. She thought about what it would mean to take that room, that specific being alone and afraid, and seen by no one who mattered, and build in its place something designed from the beginning to make a woman in that situation feel less alone, not through sentiment, through sightlines, through light, through the deliberate, technical, professional decision to build spaces that didn't make vulnerability worse. She opened the laptop again. She wrote to Rosa, "I've read it. All of it. I want to talk about the garden level. I think there's a program component that isn't in the current proposal that would strengthen the case for ongoing private funding. But the core design is right. Let's find the 400,000. Call me tomorrow." She sent it and closed the laptop. Elliot was quiet in the next room. The city was doing what it did. The kitchen smelled like coffee, and the paint from the wall they had done in April, still faintly, the way fresh paint held in a room for months if the windows stayed mostly closed. She looked at the east-facing windows. In 7 hours, more or less, the light would come through them. It would hit the painted wall and move across the kitchen floor the way it did every morning, and Elliot would wake up and announce himself with the particular vocal commitment he brought to mornings, and she would go to him, and the day would begin. She was 38 years old. She had a son who laughed like hiccups with ambitions. She had a father who came on Tuesdays and Wednesdays now. She had a small organization doing specific practical good in the specific practical way she had insisted on. She had a proposal for a building that might, if Rosa's sightlines did their work, make a woman sitting alone in a waiting room feel like she could see the door. She had lost a marriage and a brother's full trust, and the version of herself that had believed, against accumulating evidence, that things would resolve into something she hadn't had to fight for. She had gained a clearer view of what she was willing to fight for and what she was not, and the difference between those two things, and the energy that came from finally knowing which was which. She turned off the kitchen light. She went to the window and looked at the city, the lights of it, the density of it, all those lives pressing against each other in the dark, and she thought, I am still here. Not triumphant, not finished, not uncomplicated. But here, presence. She went to bed. In the next room, her son breathed his small, committed breaths. The city continued. The light eventually came.